Hey netball fans, another game of two halves really. It was great to see Celtic Dragons and Sirens on the court. Really sad to see Gallagher go off in the first quarter, and I think lots of people probably were a bit like me thinking, oh, this is not good news for Sirens, and can they still hold out without Gallagher on the court, having seen that she pairs up brilliantly with both Goodwin and Barry. And we haven't really seen anyone else come on at that goal attack role, so it kind of left the question as to what would happen next. But Barry came on, Goodwin went to goal attack, bless her, played goal attack the whole game. And actually, Sirens were moving the ball well around the D to open up the shooters just to make life a little bit easier for them. And that was really good. But you know what? Dragons came out firing as well today. They came out with full force. They were putting on some great pressure throughout the court. I felt like Dragons needed to use their width more, and this happened throughout the game. Whereas Sirens tended to use their width more around the circle, again opening up that circle for them. But first quarter was quite tight. I mean, 10-13 to Sirens, so 3 goals in it, which, as we all know, is potentially 1 turnover and then a couple of centre passes. Second quarter saw Dragons take Rebecca Robinson off goal attack and put Rudland in at goal attack, O'Dwyer at wing attack. Rudland works really well feeding Clinton, and what she created was more of a one-on-one for Clinton in the circle rather than a 2-on-1. So those feeds started to go in really well, and this is what they've got to expose. Clinton is a fantastic shooter, and she was shooting at, I don't think she missed that many, if any. She was definitely at 100% at half time. So she was absolutely on fire, and they really needed to expose that, and Rudland does that really well, and Shona O'Dwyer as well is a very clever player around the circle edge, so this worked well for them. Barry and Goodwin a little bit stickier in my opinion in that quarter, so really good changes for Dragons. However, it still flowed with 3 goals difference in it. So Dragons' highest scoring quarter that they had, that's quarter on 11, and Sirens were on 14. So again, you're looking, okay, we're starting to score, we're starting to build our scores, but actually so are the other team. We've got to pull them down. Sirens were probably at that point in time quite happy going 6 goals, 6 goals up going into half time. So yeah, half time, Clinton had shot 100%. Barry was on 16 out of 17 and Goodwin was on 11 out of 12. So still really high stats for them. Half time saw O'Dwyer go to centre and Morgan go to wing attack. Bethany Dixon came on for Sirens at wing attack. And this is where I struggle to understand the logic of taking Claire Jones off. Claire Jones for me is such a structural player for Dragons, and also almost that commanding player in the centre. O'Dwyer is fantastic, but for me she's a wing attack. She can play centre, don't get me wrong, but when you've got Claire Jones in centre and you can have Shona at wing attack, I don't know, I don't understand why you wouldn't do that. Anyway, this was a low-scoring quarter by both teams. The mid-court pressure from Dragons, however, here was really good. They started to put on a zone mid-court and put a lot of pressure on Sirens on bringing that ball through. But only 18 goals scored in total in this quarter. That's not many at all. 8 for Dragons, 10 for Sirens. So they lessened the gap in terms of how many goals there were difference, but only scoring 8 goals in one quarter is really low. Annika Lee Jones came on at goalkeeper at 4 minutes and 35 seconds left of that quarter. The thing that I don't get is why she isn't exposed at goal shooter and maybe Amy Clinton at goal attack. I guess when Amy Clinton is on fire, as she was today, and shooting pretty much all your goals and being consistent, then it's a bit of a gamble. But at the same point in time, you've got to get those scores on the board. We talked earlier about the Rhinos game in the Rhinos. We talked earlier in the Rhinos game how important it is to, you get the ball 50% of the time. You have to be scoring off your centre passes. And actually, when you get the turnover, obviously you want to score off them as well. But it's really important that you have that firepower. And I just felt that Dragons are lacking that a little bit in the fact that it's very heavily weighted on Amy Clinton. And I wonder if it was Clinton that went down instead of Gallagher and the roles were flipped slightly, whether there'd be a real issue there, or whether Annika could step in. Anyway, she came on at goalkeeper. I'm not sure I would have taken Layla off. I think Layla was doing a good job. But like I say, the pressure from Dragons in this quarter was so much better in that middle third. They did a really good job of putting that pressure on. So that's a real positive. What they've got to do then is build that into being able to score as well. So defensive pressure, good. You have to be able to attack. Quarter 4, Dragons, Robinson came back on. Rudland went to wing attack. Both teams at points in time during this game I felt were only playing in half of the court, and I think if you look at the top teams, or the teams that you would class as the top teams at the moment, obviously we're only a few games in, so it's hard to say who's going to be in that top group. But if you look at the top teams, they tend to use the whole width of the court. So you'll find them playing down one side, then they'll swing it to open up someone else, especially in that attacking third. What was happening for both Dragons and Sirens, and to be fair, it was the defensive pressure, is that they were getting really narrow in that attacking third. So they were all playing in sort of like one pocket on one side, and you could literally take half the court off and no one would have noticed at points in time during this game. And that's really key. One of the main principles of attack is create space. You cannot create space if you're playing down one half of the court. So I think that's something that both teams would need to address moving forwards. Sirens started to give the 2-second ball as well through like at the beginning of this quarter, which caused a few problems for them. So not giving the 1-second ball, not giving the 3-second ball, but hesitating. And we saw a couple of runs on the ball by Dragons for that. Every credit to Dragons, because that was the pressure that they were putting on. The mid-court offers for Dragons were a little bit flat. So again, this is kind of like that creating space thing. When you're looking at offers through court, you want to be able to look forward, you want to be able to look laterally, but you also want to be able to look deep. Now, there are a couple of really key times where there was some fantastic balls into Clinton, and she was that deep offer. But invariably what we had, especially off a centre pass, is a lot of flat. So people would come forward for the ball, but everybody would be forward then, and it would be that flat line. So you're not then getting a forward, a long, and a lateral. So again, something that they need to address. Sirens tended to put their foot down in this quarter, however. They put their foot down and they kept going. Their shooting circle seemed to open up slightly for them. Again, due to the work going on outside the circle by Bethany Dixon and Gia Abernathy, just moving that ball around. And by Goodwin and Barry playing really well together. You know, their relationship built as they went on. What you saw on the other side was Vinkumbu starting to get her head around Amy Clinton more. There was a couple of times she went for a fly throughout the match, Vinkumbu, and what I want to see from her is her real commitment to those and that timing being on point. So she'd see something, but she didn't 100% go for it. She'd kind of go halfway and then come back. So recovery fine. But actually, some of these balls that she's seeing, I think she can get to. She's just got to go hard on them and believe in herself and hit line of the ball. And I just think that will grow over time. What I think from Vinkumbu for Sirens is that she is going to be, in the second half of the season, quite lethal. First half of the season, just building that confidence. I'd like to see it move a bit quicker, but I have no doubts that she will get there. Better space at times as well by Sirens in the end of this quarter. Pushing on, like I say, they scored 15 goals in that quarter. So looking at their quarter scores, they scored 13, 14, dropped a little in the third. The third was a bit icky at 10, and then pushed on to a massive 15 goals. Dragons went backwards. So they started 10, 11, brilliant, then dropped to 8, and then dropped to 6 goals in that final quarter. 6 goals in 12 minutes. That's a goal every 2 minutes. It's just not the standard that they need to be at, and that's almost where they lost the game. Was like this, they stayed in it until half time, and then that final quarter was just nailing the coffin. I even thought, if I'm honest, quarter 3, coming off quarter 3, 29-37, they can still pull this back. Let's see what they come out with, firing in the fourth quarter, and unfortunately it just wasn't meant to be. Now, obviously, they have another game tomorrow. Karen Atkinson said that, she was worried about Gallagher going down early on. She's obviously a key player for them, but she was really pleased with Bethan Goodwin stepping out. Bethan Goodwin, by the way, got player of the match, and well-deserved, actually. She ran out that goal attack position with 3 quarters plus and didn't falter, didn't really get stuck, just kept going, grinding it out. Tanya Hoffman talked about the connections between the defence and the attack, trying to tighten up, and just the fact that she was rotating her players for steadiness and to keep the links fresh, which is great to start off with, I guess. And it'll just be interesting to see what happens moving on throughout the season, whether they can identify a solid sort of play, a solid 7 that take to court and to push on and win games. And then there's that age-old debate, isn't there? Do you want a team of 12 that, people can... We've seen injuries at Rhinos and Sirens, so maybe it will play better for Dragons that Tanya Hoffman's taking this approach towards the end of the season as players get injured, perhaps. Obviously, we hope not. or become tired, or this intensity of these back-to-back games, you know, it might play in the Dragons' favour, and it might then play negatively into teams that sometimes play sort of like their 7, and they play their strong 7 and they keep those 7 on and maybe tweak the odd 1 or 2, whereas we're seeing more changes in some of the teams. But that's yet to be seen, from my opinion. I think at this early stage, I don't think it's been too beneficial when teams have played a variety of players when they're not in winning positions. When you're in winning positions, you run ahead by 10, then I totally get it. But at the moment, it's just sometimes playing a little bit with the flow. But yeah, it's easy to say, isn't it, from a chair? But an interesting game. It's interesting now to see where teams are starting to level and where they're going. Sirens coming off 2 wins now, pushing strong, looking really at pushing for those top. I mean, they're going to want to be top 4, but definitely sort of top 5, 6 places for them. And Dragons have to get themselves off this bottom, and that's hard as well in itself, isn't it? Coming back out game after loss, but they have showed huge improvements over the last 3 games. And what will be interesting is to see them against Storm tomorrow. I mean, both teams having lost today, they're both going to want to come out and do a really good job and put on another 3 points onto what they've already got. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Anyway, next game coming up.